Everyone, it is great to be with you guys. Thanks for joining in for our monthly Buzz webinar in this October. It's finally cooling off a little bit, depending on where in the country you are. I know in my area of Texas, it was nice and cool for a couple of weeks, and now we've gotten hot again. And there's a little bit of cool weather in the forecast in the coming weeks. So it's kind of that time of year where weather's all over the place. But as always, thank you for spending time with me this evening and Sherry and others. And just really appreciate you joining us and learning more about beekeeping with all of us. If you haven't met me yet, or if I haven't had the chance to meet you, my name is Blake, and I'm one of the owners of the Bee Supply. And one of my favorite things to do is to get to spend time with all of you, talking bees once a month and focusing on all the practical applications of what we need to be doing in our bees this month. You know, that's always our goal with all of our education with TBS is to focus on what you need to be doing right now on a really practical way to help you be a better beekeeper. And honestly, I learned all sorts of things along the way, reading your questions, answering your questions, researching, doing my own bee work to prep for these webinars really is helpful for me too. So thanks for your part in helping me learn beekeeping better. As we jump in here tonight, quick little announcement. The Stand Soft Sugar Bricks, you know, it's one of our best-selling feed items. And we are now making them with Complete. So Complete is an awesome supplement. It's got about 150 something different vitamins and minerals, nutrients that are tailored just for bees. It's a great feed supplement that I talk about a lot and I really recommend. But now we are adding them to Stand Soft Sugar Bricks. So when you get these for fall and winter feeding, they now have Complete mixed in. So great product. We've got a pretty big stock of them now, and they're flying off the shelves. We have bees for sale. So if you're ready to pre-order your bees for 2025, we are not doing a price increase until 2025. There will be a price increase January 1st, 2025, but there won't be a price increase until then. So I'd highly recommend you go ahead and get your bees ordered if you do need some. We have, of course, our 30-day guarantee. So if anything goes wrong with your bees in 30 days, bring them back and we will take care of that for you. And then the earlier the earlier you order your bees, the more dates you have to pick. So if you want bees in early April next year, for example, now's the time to get those ordered because those early dates, they fill up really fast. We did this last year. We had some great takers on it, but we are offering bulk bee pricing. So if you want, 10 nooks or 10 singles or 100 nooks or 100 singles, we've got bulk pricing for all of our bees. So if you want to do a group buy and get a bunch of your friends together and get up to 30 or 40 nooks or singles or packages, then we have bulk rates for you with that. Almost last little advertisement here is our global pollen patties. We've got those in stock. And the global pollen patties, you've probably heard me talk about it before, but the bees eat them much faster. They've got more pollen in them and they're a softer consistency. So the bees tend to eat them faster. So that really helps with small hive beetles. If you're in an area that has small hive beetles, having a pollen patty that's really soft and the bees eat quickly is really helpful because the small hive beetles don't have time to lay eggs and start reproducing in a pollen patty when those patties are consumed more quickly. Last really cool thing. So we are going to be on TV this weekend. So a couple months ago, PBS came out to our facilities and they filmed a TV show. It's just or an episode of a TV show. So the show is called Startup. It features all different small businesses, and they picked us. And so we're going to have a whole episode. It's a 20 or 30-minute episode, and it airs this weekend. So if you're in the Texas area, it airs on uh, KERA, I believe, PBS on October the 5th. Nationwide, it'll air October the 6th at 11:30. Shoot, it's supposed to say AM, I don't expect any of you to be up at 11:30 p.m. It actually airs at 11:30 a.m. Central Time, nationwide on the World Channel, October 6th. And then if you're like me, I will be streaming it when it's launched on the PBS app and website October 7th. So Monday, October 7th, if you just go to the PBS website and search startup, then you'll see our episode and you can just stream it for free, I think, off the PBS website. So I haven't seen it yet. I have no idea what it's going to be like. So I'm just crossing my fingers and hoping it's good. They don't give you a sneak preview or anything when these things come out. So hopefully it's good. They filmed over at our TBS store in Blue Ridge. They filmed us packing honey. They did interviews of a lot of us in the company. We went to the bee yard and filmed bees. And so I think it's going to be a really cool episode. But haven't seen it, so hoping it's good. If you scan that QR code, then it'll take you to the PBS Startup website where you can stream it starting October the 7th. So that's kind of cool. Sherry, tell us what is going on with the TBS monthly October topics, and I will pass it your way.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, we look a little different, don't we? I am so excited, y'all. So, okay, this is our first month that we're not going to be saying, look at that beautiful cover, although we're going to still have gorgeous photos. So let me tell you how this is going to go for all of you TBS Monthly Magazine fans. We did this for you. So what we are now is, and of course, my picture is not as updated as it should be, but you're going to go to where it said free magazine. It now says TBS monthly articles. And in that, the articles I've got listed to the left, that's our October topics. And each week, you're going to see a completely new list of topics that are going to be where you see those pictures of the magazine. That's where they are. Matter of fact, if you were to sneak over there after the webinar, because I don't want you leaving us right now, then you'll see that we've already got a letter from me introducing it, and then also our first monthly article, which is strengthening weak hives for winter. So the way this is going to work is each week you're going to see a series of topics come out. So the first week you'll see, a matter of fact, but I know that it's the first week, but it was we had part of September and October all fall in the same week. So bear with us on this first one. But we will have, by the end of the weekend, the first 3 topics will be on the website. And then the following week, the third 3 topics, and so forth and so on. So let me just scan over them really quick. Strengthening weak hives, fall mite treatments. And Blake's going to talk about that tonight. Will my bees develop natural resistance if I don't do anything with my mites? Late fall, early winter feeding, that's a really good one. How to combine colonies, winter survival, how to infuse honey. I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. Winterizing your bees, queenless in late fall, time to give up on a hive, yellow-legged hornet from our wonderful Lynn Jones, and storing equipment over winter, and how to make a propolis tincture. So all of these were, just like if it were in the magazine, are now going to be landed on the website. It's going to be so much easier, y'all. I know it's a new thing, but you can do this and I can do this. So we're going to love the new platform. It's going to be easy to get. You're going to know that every week something new is coming, and I need to go in and check the website. Go in and check under the monthly articles, because we're going to be feeding it to you as you need it. It's going to be timely. It's going to be right there where you need it in much smaller segments where you can easily digest it quickly and on your schedule. Okay, so now Blake, if you'll switch to the other slide. So what I'm going to start doing instead of a spotlight is I'm going to do a quick tip or something along that line. So this month, I'm going to talk about infusing honey. I wrote this article for the articles on the blog post, and I think you're going to love it. It's going to be in week 3 or 2, week 2. Okay, so next week, look for this article to show up, and you can go in and read all of the details. So it's about infusing honey. Easy to do. Number 1, super popular. Gosh, have you been to any fruit stand, or even, oh my gosh, all of the little mom and pop stores, this is the most popular thing going. Increases the value of your crop. In other words, gonna make more money on your honey. And I think that's awesome. I would love to say that we are really into doing this, but we're just a little too busy, but I would love to do it. So your options, and I'm just gonna run over this really quick. Herbs, spices, and fruits, and peppers. Have you seen some hot honey on the shelf? I think you have. I want to talk about that really quick. So there's just easy. I've written in this article how easy the steps are. Basically, on the first option of herbs, spices, and fruits, you do a little bit different with each one, and I go into detail, but you just basically prepare the flavorings, combine the ingredients with your honey, obviously, mix it really well, seal and store, and kind of wait. Be patient. Then after a couple of weeks, you test it. If it needs to be a little bit stronger, then you let it sit a little bit longer. And most of these, you either strain the herbs out if it's really fine, or you remove the fruit. I mean, you can leave it in there, obviously, on some, but it's just kind of that easy, y'all. I really wanted to start doing this. It was easy to write the article, just having the time to do it. All right, so for peppers, I want to tell you that one's the one that came close to home with me because I just canned some peppers that a friend gave us. And that one requires a little heat. So we simmer the peppers in the honey. Then we let it rest, let them sit in there for a little bit and steep like we do our tea. Strain it, strain the peppers out of it, and then either serve or store. There's some caveats to doing peppers. I would look into a little deeper in that article before you just jump to it and say, oh, that sounds easy. But go ahead and look at the article when it comes out, and I hope you enjoy it. And I'll get better at this at the new platform. So next month, we'll do this again. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Sherry. That was great. And just a word on the new format. So these will be emailed out weekly as well. And so essentially what we're going to be doing to add to what Sherry was saying is we'll be emailing 2 or 3 articles out every week. So if you get our emails, you'll get these articles every week. And then you'll also get a summary email once a week that has all the article, or once a month has all the articles in it. So if you don't remember to go to our website and check up on what's being published, don't worry. Every week, they're all going to be published on our social media, and every week they're also going to be emailed out. And then once a month, you're going to get a listing of all of the articles in one email. So we'll keep you up to date. We'll make it so you don't have to go to the website and remember to go to the website at least. So, okay, well, let's see what the bees are doing in the bee yard now that it's kind of sort of cooling off. Not really, depending on where you are. Let's head out to the bee yard and see what they are doing here.
A common question as our bees start to dwindle and the brood rearing decreases and we're getting ready to go into the winter months is, how do I tell if my queen is failing or my hive is just naturally dwindling and the brood is reducing because of the season? Now, the quick answer to this is that's why it's so important to have more than one hive, because then you've got a comparison point. You can say, how does the brood in this hive look compared to my other 2 hives? How's the bee population decline and look in this hive compared to my other 2 or 3 or 10 hives? Having that comparison is so important. You know, if I just had one beehive, even commercially, I mean, it would be, if I had one beehive in one location, it would be hard for me to tell sometimes, you know, is this a problem or not? I'm constantly comparing and contrasting hives with each other as I'm working bees. And so it's natural to have some decline in population, but really this time of year, early October, our hive populations should be quite high. This is really as good as it's going to get all winter long. It's going to be downhill from here. So if you've got a hive that's struggling, it's not going to get better from here. It's going to get worse from here. So it's time to combine it with another hive or transfer it to a smaller nook box or something if it's, you know, below 4 frames of bees, because it's not going to typically get better from here. Now, when I'm going through a hive this time of year, what am I looking for? as far as a problem. You know, again, if they have less than a deep box full of bees, then I'm a little concerned. Something's going on with that hive, and usually the culprit is Varroa mites or not having fed enough. But when it comes to brood, again, I'm comparing how many frames of brood does this potentially problem hive have compared to all my other hives. And then what does the brood look like? So let's just look at a few things. For me, the telltale signs is, do I see larvae that are crumpled or yellow or twisted looking? How does my larva look? This frame, it's getting kind of cloudy out here. It's going to rain hopefully soon. It hadn't rained much in forever, so hopefully it rains. But this frame has capped brood and pollen and some capped honey on it. So you can maybe see that, that yellow and orange pollen in those cells mixed with the capped brood. This is pretty common this time of year, where you start to see the bees mixing in pollen and nectar with all of your brood. So it makes it very difficult to see if your queen has a good pattern or not. So you can see, like on this frame, it almost looks like a really spotty brood pattern because you've got this scattered capped brood mixed with pollen. But in many cases, it's just because the queen is laying around pollen or honey that are already in that frame. And so what I do if I see a frame like this where that brood looks a little bit spotty is I'm going to look at the other frames in the hive and see if I can find a frame that does have a good brood pattern. And so here we go. This is exactly what I'm looking for. So this frame has a pretty good brood pattern. You can see that this whole section here, the queen did a very good job of laying in a very compact brood pattern. So when I find a few frames where they have sections of pretty compact brood pattern, I'm really not worried about them. I say, you know what, I'm not going to blame the queen for a couple frames that had spotty brood. It's probably just because she was laying around pollen and nectar that the bees have brought in and started backfilling because we're getting closer to winter. The other thing I'm going to look for is just the quantity of brood. You know, does this hive have the same quantity of brood that my other hives have? And if it's, you know, several frames off, then I might have an issue. But as long as it's within a couple frames, I'm not too concerned. You can see there's, again, a good brood pattern on both sides. She's got a perfectly fine brood pattern. Everything looks very, very healthy. You won't be able to see it in the video, but there is quite a bit of larva in this hive, and that larva just looks very, very pearly white. Shiny, pearly white, that's what I'm looking for. I don't want to see twisted yellow, etc. Usually, when you have a bad queen and bad brood, you know it when you see it, you know, especially, again, if you've got a couple different hives you're comparing it to. You'll go through a hive that looks like this. It's got that nice compact pattern, at least on a few frames. The larva looks pearly white and shiny. And then you'll get to a bad hive and it just looks terrible. And that compare and contrast is the best way this time of year to tell if you have a problem or not. So again, that brood should look compact. The larva should look pearly white. And as long as you've got that, then you probably do not have an issue. If you do have a queen issue this late in the season, the best bet in general is to just combine that hive with another hive. We've got a lot of other videos on how to combine hives. You can check those out on our YouTube channel. But it's hard to get a hive to survive the entire winter with no queen. They might survive, but there's a good chance there'll be a drone layer when they come out on the other side, and they probably won't rebound in the spring. So if you lose a queen or have a very, very poor queen this time of year, it's usually better just to go ahead and combine that hive with another one. But compare it with the other hives to make sure it's actually the queen's fault. So we're going to look at this hive in the context of what do they need before going into winter. Now, you know, depending on where you are in the country, this is super relevant or not. But, you know, usually I look at 4 weeks before daytime temperatures are in the 50s. I need to have my hive 100% ready for winter. So however many pounds of honey you need in your area, Varroa mites completely under control, you know, 4 weeks before daytime temperatures are in the 50s. If you're up north, that's like now. if you're way down south, then, you've probably got 6 weeks to 2 months before you get to that point. If you're in the southeast, yeah, again, you never get there. But when it comes to food, if you're in the northern half of the United States, you probably need, or really the northern third, you need closer to 80 pounds of stored honey to overwinter. If you're in the southern half or so, you really need more like 40 pounds. So, and I want to be at that point 4 weeks before daytime temperatures consistently are in the 50s. Because even once you have cold fronts start blowing through and you've got days in the 60s and 50s, bees just stop taking and storing food efficiently. So we're going to look at this hive, see if they need food or not. The other huge caveat is, my goodness, look at the U.S. drought map, Google U.S. drought monitor, and if you're in a drought area, that's a great indication you should really be feeding pollen patties. If you're in an area with a really strong fall nectar flow, an awesome fall pollen flow with a huge variety of pollen coming in like crazy, no drought, you can probably get away in many cases without feeding pollen patties. I don't think it's going to hurt your bees. Good chance it'll still help them. But especially if you're in a drought area, if you're in Texas like I am, we're in a pretty rough drought. We haven't had a good rain in a long time. The fall pollen flow is terrible. You need to be feeding a pollen patty every 7 to 10 days. And that's ensuring that those developing baby bees that have to survive all winter long are being fed a proper nutritional diet so that they can survive the whole winter. If the bees don't have the nutritional resources to properly feed those developing bees, then they aren't going to survive the winter. So, if you're in a drought area or don't have a great fall pollen flow, feed pollen patties as an insurance every 7 to 10 days. So, checking out this hive, the first thing I do, this top box, this was just the honey super we put on after extraction, and we fed them a couple gallons of syrup, and, lifting up on it, it's got about 30 pounds stored back in it from our feeding and a little bit of nectar they found somewhere. So, all I really want this time of year, as long as, I'm about 6 weeks to 7 weeks, knock on wood, from days in the 50s and 60s. So I really only want about 30 pounds since I've got a long way until I've got those daytime temperatures that are really cool. So I'm probably not going to be feeding this hive. Now, if I've got under 30 pounds, I'm going to be giving them some gallons of syrup in September. The big thing I want to see, though, is I want to make sure I haven't overfed. I want to find frames that are mostly empty or that have plenty of room for the queen to still lay. So, I've got a couple frames like this still in the hive where, they're not completely full. They've got some open syrup and nectar, but, there's plenty of room for the bees to move honey out of the way if they want to give the queen somewhere to lay, and that's what's important. I've got a handful of frames in here that, this is beautiful. This is exactly what I'm looking for this time of year. I've got capped brood all in the middle. I've got a thick band of honey around the edge. That's really what I want to see. They're leaving this middle open for brood rearing. They're putting a thick band of honey around the edges of the frames in preparation for winter. That's what I want to see. This box has probably 10 to 15 pounds of stored honey. So they've really got plenty of stored nectar. The bottom box only, I would say, probably has about 10 pounds of stored honey in it, but they've got plenty of honey up above. And that's fine. This is probably a hive I will only give a couple more gallons of feed to this year, and they should be in pretty good shape. Now the last thing I'm looking at is I still want to see eggs and larvae, but I'm not seeing a whole lot of pollen. So I really think that, again, this hive, I'm feeding all of my hives a pollen patty every 7 to 10 days across the board, because what little pollen I am seeing in general right now just doesn't have a lot of variation to it. You don't only need pollen, but you need variation in pollen, different colors. And I'm just not seeing that. So this hive has about 6 frames of brood, which isn't bad for this time of year. It's about what you would expect with the drought we've been in. They've got sufficient stores, but not a lot of pollen. So really all I'm doing to a hive like this is I am giving them pollen patty every 7 to 10 days. I'm making sure the Varroa mites are under 1 per 100 bees, and that's it. I mean, I'll keep giving them pollen patties probably through mid-October. I'll probably give them a couple more gallons of syrup in early October, just so they can kind of put that wherever they want it in their brood nest area. And other than that, this hive's good to go. So honey-bound hives. This is a fairly common problem, especially on years where there's a decent nectar flow, is you can have a hive that brings in so much nectar, they fill up all their space, and the queen has nowhere to lay. This is a bigger problem in the spring and the summer when we really want to make sure the queen has tons of room to lay. Usually in those times of year, you can just keep adding boxes and the bees will just keep moving that nectar and honey up, keeping the brood nest clear. Where it gets a little bit tricky is this time of year. You know, this is October. And so we want our bees to be storing a lot of honey, but we still want them to leave a little bit of room for the queen to lay, because we wanted her to keep laying brood as long as possible. If you're in the southern half of the United States, you know, you probably have a month to a month and a half left of some brood production. The northern half is really wrapping it up here in the next couple of weeks, depending on exactly where you are. But in whatever case, it's a delicate balance of making sure the hive has enough food, but not too much. So here's what I do. Number one, if I have excess food in a hive, I am very quick, as long as it's a healthy hive, to shake the bees off of a frame of honey and go give it to a weaker hive that could use that food. Or in some cases, if I have a hive that's almost dead and they have a box full of honey, I might take that entire box and put that entire box of honey on a different hive that needs food. So you can move honey around between hives as long as it's coming from a healthy hive. And really by that, I just mean you don't want a hive that had foul brood everywhere, and you don't want to transfer that foul brood. So as long as you didn't have a foul brood problem, it's fine to transfer honey around. But this is a good candidate of what I'm talking about. So this hive, we've got 2 deep boxes and a medium box. This top deep box is completely full of capped honey. I mean, take my word for it. Well, hey, we're in the bees. It wouldn't be fun if we didn't look at some frames of honey, check out what's going on. That's what we're here for. So, I mean, every single frame looks just like this one. I mean, it's a frame. This is a medium box. Every frame is completely full of capped honey. Both sides, absolutely beautiful. This is what we want to see this time of year. They've done a great job. We had some of Stan's soft sugar bricks on this hive and pollen patties, and the bees in this yard have just done phenomenally well, thanks to Shannon and thanks to the sugar bricks, the pollen patties, and mite treatment. Every hive in this yard is just essentially, except for the one I showed you earlier, is bursting at the seams. So they've done a great job. That top box is completely full. When I look at this bottom box, it's pretty full as well. When I lift up on it, when I look at the second box, it's probably got another 30 pounds of honey in it. And so I'm going to dive down into the brood nest to see what I can see. So this is really, wow. So this is one of our golden Cordovan hives. Check out that brood. Kind of crazy for April. I mean, sorry, it wouldn't be crazy for April. It's kind of crazy for October. So beautiful, beautiful brood. Completely just a great brood pattern. This side, you can see we've got a little bit of honey around the edges, a ton of brood in the middle. So even though they've got a lot of honey up in that second box, the bees are still able to keep enough space clear in the brood box to continue rearing brood. Now this is what I'm looking for. Well, first of all, there's the queen. There's our golden Cordovan queen right there. You can see it, she's kind of pretty light in color. So there she is, she's happy and still laying. But one of the key signs for me to see if a hive is honey bound or not is there open space where the queen is laying? So if you take a look at this frame, you've got capped brood, you've got all this open space, and the queen's actually actively laying in it right now. And I've got multiple frames in the hive like this, where again, some honey on the outside edge, capped brood, open space in the middle. So the bees are not backfilling all this open space in the brood nest with honey. You can see they're starting to do it over here on the edge. So you can see that there was capped brood all over here, and as this brood is hatching, the bees are starting to fill all this area with nectar. And so they're kind of starting to shrink the area that the queen can lay. That's very, very normal to see going into the winter. But again, they've still got 4, 5, 6 frames available in that brood nest for the queen to lay in. I've also got my outside frames look like this. So you can see the bees are starting to fill them with honey and nectar or syrup, depending on if you're feeding them or not. And that's okay too. I mean, I want to see 3, 4, 5 frames on the outside edge of that brood nest full of honey. And those inside frames are still reserved for brood rearing. So if you're going through a hive and they are totally backfilling the whole brood nest area, that's when you definitely want to stop feeding or pull some frames of honey out and give them to weaker hives and put some empty frames in the middle so that they can keep rearing that brood. I'm going to correct myself there. I should just edit that out, but editing is such a pain. If you put deep frames of comb back in the hive, you want to put it on the outside edges of the brood nest. So, for example, I'm going to show you on a medium box, because I can tip it up on edge. So, if these middle 3 frames were my brood nest area, and one of them I wanted to pull out because they were filling it completely full of honey. Let's say I pulled this frame out, it was full of honey, I gave it to another hive, and then I brought an empty frame back. I would want to put it on, I wouldn't put it between these 2 frames of brood because I'd never want to break up my brood nest. I would put it on the outside edge of where my brood is. So the principle is you never want to separate your brood. You can put those empty frames on the outside edge of where your brood is, and then the queen can move to them and lay there. So, but overall, the key is that if you've got a hive that has an excess of honey, you can move that honey around to other hives. But in this case, this hive is exactly what I want to see, which is they still have room available in the brood nest for the queen to lay, but they have a very healthy amount of honey to survive the winter months. So adding and taking away boxes before wintertime, what do you need to know? Here's the key components, okay? If a hive is really strong, you know, if all the boxes on the hive are completely full of bees, full of honey, full of brood, this time of year, this is early October, anywhere in the country, I'm not going to keep adding boxes. So once you get to early October, swarming, the threat of swarming is past. I love to see all my boxes full of bees. I'm still not going to add boxes. So from now until next year, you know, February, March, April, depending on where in the country you are, I'm not going to be adding boxes. So my main role right now is making sure that I don't have too many boxes. And really, I'm only concerned about too many boxes if a box is just completely empty. If a box is completely empty, not a bad idea to pull it off, as long as the bees have enough honey in the lower or other boxes to sustain them through the winter. So if I'm going through this hive and the top box is just completely empty and the bottom 2 boxes are full of bees and full of honey, I'm going to pull that top box off. Anytime really between now and March, I'm going to make that happen. If I'm going through this hive, and a common thing that you see is that the bottom box is almost completely empty and the bees and the brood have all moved up into the upper boxes, then again, I'm going to go pull that bottom box out. So anytime between now and spring, if a box is completely empty, doesn't have a lot of resources in it, doesn't hurt to just pull it off and let the bees, focus on the space that they do have. So that's kind of what we're targeting this time of year when it comes to boxes. Now, if a hive is really weak and they're not even filling up the boxes that they do have, so let's take a look at this hive. And I'm looking at the upper box. The upper box is pretty much empty. I mean, I've got a few bees running around up there, but it's like maybe, I don't know, like a frame of bees cumulative. They're just kind of up there because they're hanging out. So not a lot going on. in that box. The next box down, again, a couple of frames of bees, not a whole lot. The bottom box is completely empty. So essentially what this hive is they've got 3 frames, maybe 4 frames of bees, and that's about it. So it's not a very strong hive. So I can do one of two things. I can consolidate all the bees, brood, and honey into one box. So I can just make sure this box has, 4 to 6 frames of honey, a couple of fairly empty frames, and maybe my brood in the middle, and then I can leave them a single story hive. But if it's pretty weak, the other option is to put them in a nook box. And so you can get a wooden nook box, just like this. We have these, we sell these. So it's just a 5-frame wooden nook box with a telescoping lid and an inner cover. And you can transfer these weak little hives into this wooden nook box, and they overwinter much, much better in these wooden nook boxes than in, double deep hive, with a bunch of empty space in it. Lots of people overwinter these nooks. So if you have a really small weak hive, I would say in the 3 to 4 frames of bees range, you can transfer them into this nook, and they've got a much better chance at overwintering successfully. If they're, 5, 6, 7 frames of bees, don't worry, you can leave them in a single. If they're like 1 or 2 frames of bees, it's probably better to go ahead and combine it with another hive than trying to save it. The one note I will make though is before you transfer this and try to save a weak hive in a nook box over the winter, it's important to understand why it's so weak. If it's because it's queenless, it's not going to help to transfer it into a new box. If it's because they've got tremendous varroa mite problems, again, nook box isn't going to help you. But if you have a hive that doesn't have hive varroa mites, they have a healthy laying queen, they don't have a bunch of foul brood, and they're just weak and small, then transferring them into one of these nook boxes is a great way to ensure that they survive the winter.
So there you go, folks. That was BR tips for you there. Let's jump back into our virtual classroom here and talk about what might have been missed in that BR portion. So, oh, real quick, as we jump in here, our bees in our own commercial operation, most of them were headed into sheds. We overwinter indoors in Idaho, most of our commercially managed bees. And these are just some pictures of the bees rolling into the sheds. You can see the pictures on the left. This is a semi-load of bees, or 3 semi-loads of bees lined up. The nets have been taken off the trucks, and they'll be unloaded into stacks like you see on the right. And these buildings are refrigerated. They're kept at like a perfect 43 degrees. The humidity is low. The CO2 levels are monitored. It's a perfect hibernation temperature for bees. And so when we overwintered outdoors in Texas, our bees would consume, 30, 40, 50 pounds of honey over the winter. In these sheds, they consume about 12 pounds of honey. And so it's far more efficient. They eat less honey. They cluster more efficiently. But the reason the lights are red is that even at 43 degrees, if you were to turn on a bunch of white lights, the bees would still come trickling out. And so the red lights, though, the bees don't really see red, and so they stay in the hive even with the red lights on. But if you were to turn on the white lights, the bees would come trickling out of there. I wanted to talk about flooding just for a second because we have lots of friends, of course, in the Carolinas and Tennessee and Florida and Georgia that have just obviously been hammered with awful flooding weather, and it happens all the time, all over the country. I mean, this was one of our bee yards in North Dakota. They've got a fast 5, 6 inch rain, and we had a whole yard flood. There was 180 beehives in this yard and just completely wiped out. The flood waters came up and soaked all the hives and killed all the bees. And so you can see the picture on the right. It's not pretty. You can see the dead bees in the water, and it's just disgusting and terrible. Oops, excuse me. And so if you get I want to talk about this a little more broadly. I mean, if your equipment looks like this, it's trash. I mean, these bees sat underwater for a number of days, and everything is just a loss. And there were even some that were swept away completely. And so, if it looks this bad, you really just have to throw it away and start over. Now, what's a little more common is that maybe the lid got blown off and it rained inside the hive, and you find it a few days later. The goal, if that happens, is to shake all the water out of the honeycomb, because mold will start growing in the honeycomb if you don't. So shake all the water out of the honeycomb and then set those frames out so that they can fully dry. And once they're fully dry, you can store them and they're perfectly fine. What you don't want is for water to sit in these frames for a number of days. And that's what happens, you know, this picture is what happens. You know, everything just gets moldy and it's a loss. But if you can get the water out of the frame pretty quickly within a few days, you should be just fine. So the key is if you have a flooding incident, shake the water out of the frames. Sometimes if it's a big flood, you may have a lot of mud in the hives even, and that's actually okay. You can get a water hose and just spray those combs out, shake the waters out, spray them out again, shake them out. You can really just rinse frames, and it'll get all the dirt and debris out, and you're able to let them dry and reuse them. So, but long-term water exposure, that's your enemy. That's what you want to try to avoid. Fall blooms. So, we've got aster blooming, we've got broomweed, goldenrod's blooming across much of the country. If you're in an area with goldenrod or ragweed, two different things. Goldenrod's a little more common. You may walk into your bee yard this time of year and wonder what that musty, stinky sock kind of smell is, and it's often ragweed. I'm sorry, a goldenrod. Goldenrod nectar, as the bees are fanning their wings, evaporating the moisture out of it, just gives this really musky, maybe stinky sock kind of smell. So if you smell an unusual odor in your bee yard this fall, that's probably what it is. It's probably the goldenrod. You may also see some honeydew, and I love this picture because this is a tree that has a lot of honeydew in it. And this tan, you see this wet tan look all over the ground as honeydew that's just raining out of this tree. And of course, those are the little bugs that produce a nectar-like substance on trees. And the bees will actually go and lick it up like nectar. And uh, usually it's not a tremendous amount, but some years you actually will get a fair amount of honeydew honey in your hive. And so you can see if leaves on trees are just looking kind of sticky, that's often from honeydew. So current drought conditions, lots of drought areas. I mean, this is the drought map in the U.S. right now. Lots of areas that's fairly widespread. Um, some of these areas are going to be changing pretty quickly over here in the east, where the hurricane just went through. But there are lots of regions right now where there is drought stress on the plants and they aren't producing a high quality pollen. So if you're in a brown or red zone, sometimes the yellow, but more of the brown, tan, red zones, then you probably need to be feeding some pollen substitute to make sure your bees have plenty of nutrition going into the winter months. Just for reference, this was 2023. So this was at the same time last year. This was our drought map. And it looks pretty different. I mean, the South had a horrendous drought going on. Central US did, but the Central West was pretty awesome, and the East was pretty awesome. So flipping back to this year, it's not quite as severe in most areas, but a little more widespread. So inside your fall hives, what should you expect to see? Most regions in the US still have 4 to 6 frames of brood, and you might see a lot of pollen scattered in with the brood. You might not see a lot of pollen if you're in a drought area, but 4 to 6 frames of brood is roughly where I'm seeing most hives at the moment. Varroa mites, this is your last chance to effectively manage Varroa. So if you haven't taken any action, number one, if you haven't taken any action against Varroa mites yet, I'm pretty concerned about you and your bees. Varroa mite levels peak in July and August. And if you didn't take any actions against Varroa mites, you could have a really severe problem at this point. So um, once the bees start really clustering in the winter, so once daytime temperatures are in the 50s and the bees cluster, most mite treatments are not terribly effective. So right now is kind of your last window to do a mite test and treatment. So if you haven't taken action, get out there, do a test, do a treatment. If you treated your bees like you were supposed to way back in July, you probably want to go ahead and do another test to make sure that those levels didn't creep back up. So just because this is your last window to do a treatment if it's needed. For testing options, the alcohol wash is by far the most accurate. But I realize that a lot of people don't want to take the time to do an alcohol wash and they don't want to kill their bees doing an alcohol wash. In which case, a sticky board is a little bit more practical for a lot of beekeepers, and it's really simple. We sell these. We you just in it. The ones we sell actually have instructions on it. So if you buy one and flip it over on the back side, it'll have instructions on how to use it. You just stick it under a screen bottom board or directly into the entrance of your hive. You let it sit for 24 hours. And then when you pull it out, you can count the varroa mites stuck to that sticky board. And if there's more than 11, you need to do a mite treatment. So simple as that. Oops, a little far there. Fall feeding, just as a reminder, the goal is to maintain winter stores in the second box with 3 to 4 frames of honey in the bottom box. Be careful not to overfeed. If just you're just trying to get to the amount of hot food that your bees need. And I've got a slide in a second that kind of breaks it down by region in the country for how much they need. If your hive has less feed than needed, you're going to want to feed 2 to 1 sugar syrup as quickly as possible. Because again, once those daytime temperatures drop down into the 50s, your bees are not going to want to drink that liquid syrup very much. So you've got a couple weeks left to get the bees to store all the food that they need. We covered that in we talked about honey-bound hives in the video, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But here's just a good illustration of well-fed hive, well-fed hive versus an overfed hive. The picture on the left is overfed, where they're filling in all the frames in the brood nest with nectar or syrup. The picture on the right is what we want to see, where you've got some brood and a little bit of honey around the edge. Fondant, sugar cakes, and stand soft sugar bricks. What should you use and when for fall and winter feeding? So, a general rule of thumb that I abide by is if your bees need to store a lot of food quickly, so if your hive is maybe it has 20 pounds of food and they should have 40, the fastest way to get bees to put on weight is to feed them a liquid diet. They're going to use it faster, they're going to store it faster. Once you get within, 10 pounds of where they need to be, or daytime temperatures are consistently in the 50s, if your bees still need food, you've got to switch to more of a solid feed because the liquid feeds, the bees just are not going to typically go into the feeder, drink it, and store it. They need a feed that's right on top of their winter cluster, which would be fondant, sugar cake, or stand soft sugar bricks. Now, you can feed fondant or a sugar cake or a sugar brick. That's just pure carbohydrates, which is very helpful for bees and works. Stand soft sugar bricks have complete and they have some protein and they have a lot of carbohydrates. So it's a little better for the bees. And it's kind of giving them everything they need all at once. But what you should keep in mind is if your bees do need food and daytime temperatures are in the 50s, any form of feed is better than nothing. So get something on them so that they don't starve to death. Pollen substitute, what I'm doing is I'm feeding 2 to 3 pounds per month for strong hives, and I'll definitely do that through October. If I still am seeing a lot of brood in my hives in November, I'm going to feed them pollen patties in November as well. If the bees are totally shut down and there's very little brood in the hive, you really don't need pollen patties. I mean, the idea behind pollen patties is that the baby bees that they're actively rearing have all the nutrition that they need to be reared properly to overwinter well. So if there's no brood in your hive, you're really wasting your money feeding pollen substitute in the fall. In the late winter, I feed it to help them get started rearing brood. But in the fall, it's only helpful if there's still active brood rearing going on. So some years they're completely done, in October if you're further north. And then some years in the south, it's still hot in November and the queen's still going, in which case I'm going to keep feeding that pollen substitute. Hive wraps, moisture boards, upper entrances. In general, my rule of thumb is if you're in the southern half of the United States or on the West Coast, you really don't need anything. Hive wraps and all that tend to not be particularly helpful. If you're in the northern half of the United States, a hive wrap isn't going to hurt. It may not make a tremendous difference, but it's not going to hurt. What you've got to keep in mind is you do need a very slight upper entrance or a moisture board to make sure that condensation doesn't collect on the underside of the lid. And then you don't want wet condensation raining down on the bees all winter long, because wet bees and winter are not a good combination. So if you do wrap your hive, you need some upper ventilation to let that wet, moist air out. Or you need a moisture board to absorb the moisture. If you have an Apame hive or a Hive IQ hive or an insulated hive, you really don't need any sort of insulation beyond that. They're already insulated hives. Fall and winter hive configuration. So this is talking about brood boxes, not supers. But ideally in the winter, you're going to have two brood boxes, and then you might have two brood boxes and one honey super going into winter. In general, I want my bees to fill all the boxes on the hive at least 25% full of bees. If I've got a box that isn't 25% full of bees, then I'm going to pull that box off. So that's just my general rule of thumb. Uh, you know, uh, Small, weak hives don't need three boxes. They might just need one box. You just want to make sure there's plenty of honey in that one box. But most people overwinter with just two boxes. But if you've got a hive that's got three boxes and they're all pretty much full of bees, perfectly fine to leave it on there throughout the winter. Introducers and screen bottom boards. So daytime temperatures, when the daytime temperatures, um, yeah. Oh my goodness, I didn't edit that right. It's supposed to say when daytime temperatures are consistently in the 60s, add an introducer. Do not add a queen excluder. Uh, you want to pull your queen excluders off, which I'll talk about in just a second. But when daytime temperatures are consistently in the 60s, you're going to want to add that introducer. You don't have to use an introducer. It helps a little bit keeping cold wind from blowing into the hive. No commercial beekeepers use introducers, and most small scale beekeepers, I would say, don't either. So it's one of those things where if you've got it and you can throw it on the hive, perfectly fine to do so. If you don't get it on, don't worry about it. Screen bottom boards, I leave screen bottom boards on year round, so I don't take them off. What I do is I ensure that the wind cannot blow underneath the hive, because you don't want a cold wind blowing up under the hive and into that screened bottom board all winter long. So just block off the sides of your stand, so the cold wind can't blow under it. Something else that works really well is if you just have a spare deep box or a medium box. I just, with no frames, I just put that on the ground and I set my whole hive with a screen bottom board on top of it. So I'm using that empty box like a hive stand. And that works really well because it seals it and no air can blow up under there. Um, but you don't have to remove your screen bottom board. You just want to prevent the cold wind from blowing underneath it. There's the right slide. So remove queen excluders. You do not want a queen excluder on during the winter. For one, it just kind of breaks up the cluster. But then if all the bees move through the queen excluder up into the upper boxes and the queen gets trapped below, she'll freeze to death. So entrance queen excluders should be removed this time of year. And then wind blocks, you know, um, it doesn't hurt. It's not like your bees are going to die if they don't have a wind block. But if they're in an open field where you've got a strong north wind all winter, it doesn't hurt to create some sort of a wind block. And then it doesn't hurt to put some bricks on top of the lids just so that the wind doesn't blow the lid off in the winter. If the wind blows the lid off and you've got a really cold couple of nights, it can certainly kill your hive. So lid should be secured. And then if they're in an area that just gets constant cold wind, some sort of a wind block will be helpful for the bees. Queenless in October. So hopefully this doesn't happen to you, but you could still go queenless this time of year. So if you're going through your hive and most of your hives have brood and you come across a hive that has no brood at all, they're probably queenless. Now, if none of your bees or none of your hives have brood, that's probably just a sign that they've shut down for the winter and you shouldn't be worried. But if you've got other hives and they all have brood and then this one hive doesn't, they're probably queenless. So if this happens this time of year, you've got three options that I recommend. Number one, if it's less than one deep box full of bees, just combine it with another hive. We've got lots of videos on our YouTube channel that talk about how to combine hives, but less than a deep box of bees and queenless, they're just not going to make it. So it would be better to just combine them with another hive. If they're more than one box full of bees, you can overwinter them as normal. And as early as possible next spring, you can give them a few frames of brood to allow them to raise their own queen and boost their strength. So they don't have to have a queen to overwinter properly. So you can just let them overwinter, see if they survive, and then give them some frames of brood and let them rear their own queen in March. Now, caveat here, if you're going to do this, you need to get a few vials of queen pheromone and stick it in that hive. Um, you don't necessarily, I would say, I forget how long they last, but probably once a month you're going to need to switch it out. That way the bees still smell queen pheromone and you don't have a hive that develops into a drone laying or laying worker hive. Because of the absence of queen pheromone, especially once spring gets started next year, the worker bees are going to develop ovaries and they're going to start laying eggs, and then you've lost the hive. So if you're going to leave it queenless all winter, you need a few vials of queen pheromone in order to make them think that they've got a queen until you're ready to add some brood, at which point you would pull those vials out and let them raise their own queen. Or the final option is that you can find a fellow beekeeper with a small weak hive and combine it with yours, or you may have a small weak hive with a queen and combine all those together so that now you do have a hive with a queen. So that's actually number three is my favorite. I mean, if I've got a hive with only 3 or 4 frames of bees, but they've got a laying queen, I'll combine that with my queenless hive. And now they've all got a boost in strength and I fixed my queenless problem. Wax moth and small hive beetle cleanup. So small hive beetles are probably not an issue for most of you this time of year. As we go into the fall and winter, they're not as much of a problem because they're more active in the spring and the summer. But you may have hives that have died and you're just now finding them, and it's time to clean up from wax moth or small hive beetle damage. I will note that once we start getting freezing temperatures at night, it does kill all the wax moths. So they're not usually a problem once freezing temperatures get here. But before then, they can still make a mess. So both of these frames in this picture are perfectly salvageable. So the one on the left, you can see how this, okay, you can kind of see the frame looks kind of greasy and slimy. That's the small hive beetle damage. And then you've also got some wax moth damage up near the top bar here. A frame like that, I would just scrape all the wax moth damage off that I can. And then I would rinse that whole frame out with a water hose to get the slime off of it. I would shake all the moisture out of it, let it dry, and then use it back in a hive or store it for next year. The picture on the right is just a frame with some wax moth tunnels going through it. That the bees will still clean that frame up and use it. So I would stick this frame in the freezer for a day or two to kill any wax moth larvae or eggs. And then I would just store it and use it next year or put it back on the hive. And a strong hive will pretty easily clean up that level of damage. When I throw a frame away, it's when a frame is, you know, half or more just complete webbing. If the bees are going to have to rebuild half the frame, then it's better just to trash it and start over. But when you just have some mild webbing like this, the bees will clean that up and clean it out. Okay, Sherry, do you want to? I'm going to turn it over to you. And Sherry's going to talk about storing comb for winter, which is super relevant as we all start pulling boxes off of our hives. And it's time to start storing it. And so she's going to go over how to store those frames in a way that keeps all those pests out. So, Sherry, I will turn it over to you.
Yo, let's see if I can get this right. Uh-oh, there we go. I hope everybody's having a good one. All right, here we go. There we go. I got it. Let me reduce chat. Here we go. All right, y'all. Storing frames. Storing frames is, look at that freezer right there. I'm going to admit to y'all, that's our freezer. Golly, does it need a little cleaning there? It does. But I'll tell you what, that's the best $100 freezer that we ever bought off of Craigslist right there. Well, let's get started. We want to run through just some options, a few frame storage options for you. And let me see if I can hide this stuff up here at the top. Hide that stuff. Hide the top panel. Hide video.
We can't see it, Sherry. It's
Oh, you
okay.
can't? Okay. All right.
Nope,
Good.
you're good.
And I won't worry about it. All right. Awesome. I'll jump into it then. Here we go. Here we go. All right, the benefits of freezing frames. Well, I'll tell you, that frame freezer, oops, I'm on the wrong one. The importance of dry comb. I'm sorry, y'all. I got 14 things going at one time, including your questions. So I'll get in gear really quick. The importance of dry comb. I love this picture by Phyllis Stroud. It shows her letting bees rob out the comb. The importance of that is that storing wet comb is so hard. You have issues with pests, you have issues with mold, roaches, ants, you name it. And being able to get them dried out ahead of time is going to make a big difference in how well they store over winter, or even if you're doing it in the middle of the year. So doing so can be done either right after you take off the frames off of the boxes off of your hives. Gosh, y'all. So too many distractions. Right after you take your boxes off for honey extraction, put them right back on the hive at night, and they'll dry them out overnight. You'll have them good and dry. You can pop them off then. It'll stop fermentation. That's a big part of it. Letting the bees rob it out. Take it away from your hive like Phyllis did here. This is a big deal. You don't want to let these get robbed out right next to your hive. That's going to cause you some robbing issues, and we don't want that to happen. So make sure that when you do this, like Phyllis did here, that you're doing it away from your hive. So now we're here, the benefits of freezing frames. And this is me going, there's 99 frames in that freezer. That's a good storage. That really and truly can take a lot of your burden off, depending on how big of a beekeeper you are, how many hives you've got. I really and truly think that the best way to do it is not the way that I have done it here, but to do it in wrapping the frames in plastic. So do as I say, not as I do. We have issues with those frames crystallizing if we, getting ice crystals. So you really want to make sure that you're wrapping those in plastic to keep that from forming. I've read that folks rinse that off. We've never done that. What we've done to just kind of overcome it is just set those frames out, let them dry in a closed space where they can't be gotten to by bees, and just let air circulate across them so that it doesn't become a problem. You can freeze the frames for at least 24 to 48 hours prior to the next methods that I'm talking about, but it can be long term. I put this picture of these honey frame storage bags. This is a new product for us, and it's really pretty cool. One fits one frame. And they're relatively inexpensive, and I'm quite certain they'll be used over and over again. So look into getting these. I would definitely do this if I've got, only a few hives that I'm trying to freeze frames for. It's a great way to keep the mess out of your freezer, and you don't end up with the freezer looking like ours does. It's a good product, and it's a quick, easy fix. You don't have to wrap it up in saran wrap and so forth. So give that a shot. Long-term storage. I've got 3 pictures here, and I'm going to start with the one on the left, Paramoth. Paramoth's a good product, been around for a long time. It's got odor that's associated with it, so that might not, fall into everybody's favorite category, but it works and works well to stop wax moth damage in long-term storage. A friend of ours, Jay Poindexter, this is a picture of his, and this is how he did it. He just bagged them up, wrapped them in plastic bags, and taped them really good, and put Paramoth in between the boxes. About a quarter to a half cup, depending on how many boxes deep that you're storing. We've done towers of it where we would put, probably, I don't know, quarter to half cup is probably accurate, in between every 2 to 3 boxes. And then about twice during the winter, we would replenish that, because it is a fumigant. So it does evaporate eventually. So you do have to replenish it, but it's a good product. Keep in mind that you'll need to air those out prior to using them next year. That it is a very pungent smell. And we would leave them out, oh gosh, even a couple of weeks before we would put them on the hive, just to make sure that, or at least pull the paramoth off and let them air, so that we didn't have that so strong when we put it back on the bees. The center one, kind of my new favorite product. It's called Sertan, and it is the picture up on the right, that little small bottle. It's a wonderful product. I have the formula here. It's a 1 to 19 parts. So 1 part Sertan, 19 parts water, and you spray your frames with it. Now, of course, you want that to dry before you put them away, but it's an all natural product. It's a bacillus. It's hard for me to spell that, but I can say it. In other words, it's a natural organism that will not hurt your bees or hurt the frames whatsoever, and has 0 smell. And the best part about it is you do it one and you're done. You don't have to do like the paramoth and keep reapplying it time after time. It's just a one and done, but you do need to make sure that the frames are dry, because you're coating them with a pump up sprayer. So you put that 1 to 19, 5% solution in your pump up sprayer, spray them, and then let them dry. And then you can put them in a bag like this super bag that I've got here showing you in this middle picture. Good product. And the last method for long-term storage is brought to us by our friend Rich Beggs. And storing dry comb, as long as it's dry and it doesn't have pollen in it, you can open air store it. Now, pollen is it will attract just about everything, including wax moths, but also roaches and mice and other things. They'll still continue, even if you've frozen. You might not get small hive beetles or wax moths that way, but you will attract other creatures in there if there's pollen in it. But just dry honey frames, you're good. Now, if they're brood frames, I ask that you freeze them before you do anything, and then probably either let them get robbed out before you would do the open storage, because they really need to be cleaned out or other things are going to get into it. So, and that's it. It was a short, quick tonight, Blake. I hope that was okay. And I'm sorry, y'all, for fouling up at first. James got up and walked off, and that took me off my game. And then I had this over here beeping at me. And it's like, okay, I got too much going at one time, but I got it done.
No problem. It was great, Sherry. Thank you so much. Um, Fantastic. So yeah, I mean, just keep in mind, and you guys, a lot of you guys know this, but comb is really gold. I mean, in the beekeeping world, your comb is so valuable because that's what you can get started with next year when it comes to your bees. So if this is your first year in beekeeping, your bees probably seem like they grew really slowly, and it's because it just takes a lot of time and effort when it comes to your bees drawing out the comb, and it takes a lot of honey or a lot of syrup as well. And so it's super helpful to have all that comb. So even if your hive dies over the winter, then you can save that comb, and a hive will restart next year so much faster. So yeah, just make sure that you save that comb, whatever it takes, whatever method you use, because that's what's going to get you started next year, way better. So that's it, folks. Great to chat with you. Great to visit with all of you. Appreciate you tuning in and watching the webinar. And if you have questions, always feel free to reach out. We'd be happy to help any way we can. And we can't wait to see you for November, where we'll talk a little bit more about cold weather management for bees and probably some products of the hive, and talk about what it looks like to get our bees ready for the upcoming season. So, with that, we can't wait to see all of you in just a month. So, have a great October, everyone, and we'll see you in November.